way of grace, and it's all over. Everything that Jesus said, everything that he taught, lies so much so that in his most celebrated and in fact last utterance on the resurrection to immortality, the words that he spoke to the good thief, he addresses them to somebody thief. He addresses them to somebody who had spent pretty much all of his adult life contravening whatever laws were out there. But at the very last moment, that man finds grace. And Jesus says to him, this day you will be with me in paradise. This day. It all brings us, I guess, to the nub of the question, which is, what do we think will happen to us when we die? What do we think has happened? What do we think has happened to those whom we have loved and lost? The liturgy says, for those of us who believe life is not taken away but change, is not taken away but change. It's a question, I think, of the degree to which we are able to believe in Christ's promise and able to believe that those words are true, because that changes everything. It means that no separation, no matter how agonizing or how painful, is forever. It means that there is no tiny impulse of the soul toward its God that goes unmarked and unresponded to by the God of mercy. It means that our idea of perfection takes the form of a reunion of all who have ever lived and loved. This is November, the month that the Church sets aside for consideration of the last things, eschatology, death, judgment, heaven or hell. My guess is that the Sadducees found great comfort in their belief. You lived by the rules, you kept the rules, and you knew you were a good person because you had a steady job and money was coming in and your kids were healthy and you lived an appropriately long life. Everything was neatly tied up. I find myself wondering what happens to the Sadducees who lived by the rules, and lost a wife to breast cancer in her 20s, or had a child born with birth defects, or discovered that his business partner defaulted and he was left a bankrupt and a disgrace in the eyes of the I wonder if those things called upon him to question the hitherto watertight certainties of his creed. And I wonder when he did lose those he loved, whether or not something in him screamed out, oh no, this can't be the whole story. Surely what I loved in so-and-so must softly, somehow, endure forever. Love just doesn't dissipate into the air. Jesus tells us that Moses was at pains to say that God is the God of the living. Last week, when we celebrated the Feast of All Saints, the preface says, we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. All being massed around us, praying for us, attempting to help us, that they are separated from us, the living, by the merest, flimsiest kind of veil. And Jesus says that it's not here in this life that we discover who were the good guys and who were the bad guys, but only in eternity. It must have been a comfort to be a Sadducee right up until experience contradicted the theology. It must be a comfort to be a biblical literalist, to be a fundamentalist, right up until the moment when circumstances don't fit that construct anymore. Some years ago, somebody wrote a book of theology, and it was entitled, Your God is Too Small. And that God of the Sadducees, the God who made a deal with Moses and the prophets and stuck by it, who gave no second chances, who snuffed out human life with as little thought as we would give to stepping on an ant. That God's hard to love. There may be justice and magnificence in that God, but he's remarkably short of mercy, tenderness, or compassion. And Jesus is saying to the Sadducees, your God is too small. Your God is too small. Your God loves you. Your God even loves you when you're being thick-headed enough to twist your opinion of his nature to fit your own narrow creed. It's perhaps a little scary to live with no absolute hard and fast answers about some of the things that we care very much about. But the God that Jesus reveals through the New Testament refuses to be crammed into our little music boxes. He's popping off the cosmic Jack in the Box, whose melody is always coming to the point when the top blasts off and he says to us, that's not the way it is. The Sadducees stood there, I suppose, as Jesus demolished their maliciously constructed little set-up argument. And you wonder whether or not they had enough of grace in them to respond to the ideas he was presenting, or whether or not they walked away thinking, I don't care what he says, I know what's right. That way, I would suggest, dear friends, brings us to separation rather than union with God. It's dangerous because it is so seductively reassuring. Amen.